Mornings in the Grant household began with the hum of the coffee maker and the soft scrape of cutlery against porcelain. Elena moved through the kitchen like clockwork, 2 sugars in Daniel's cup, 1 in hers. She didn't need to look at the clock to know it was 6:45. Daniel always appeared at 7 sharp, his hair damp from the shower, tie in hand, expression unreadable. He never kissed her good morning. He didn't need to. "Elena," he said, his tone clipped. "You overcooked the eggs again." "I'm sorry," she murmured. The words fell into the air like habit, not apology. The quiet between them had become a living thing, a patient, persistent silence that stretched across every breakfast. Free drive every evening spent watching muted TV news. Daniel's calm, intellectual voice belonged to his patients and colleagues, not to her. At home, his sentences were short, his smiles rehearsed. Yet to everyone else, Daniel Grant was the picture of stability. The man who helped traumatized children find their voices. The devoted husband with the elegant, reserved wife. Their neighbors called them perfect. Elena had learned to nod and smile, to let people believe what they needed to. Sometimes, she caught her reflection in the kitchen window. A woman in a soft gray robe, eyes dull, shoulders curved inward. A ghost with a pulse. Once she'd asked him if he still loved her. It was late. His laptop open, the glow of the screen washing his face pale. He didn't look up. Love is a childish word, Elena. You should be past needing it. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the steady rhythm of his breath beside her. Outside, the wind rattled the branches, whispering something she couldn't quite hear. In the morning, she rose before dawn, ironed his shirts, brewed the coffee. Routine was safer than questions. But as she set the table, she noticed a small dark stain on Daniel's cuff. Rust-colored, almost hidden in the fabric. She hesitated, fingers trembling. For the first time in years, she didn't wipe it away. The rain began after midnight. Soft at first, then pounding against the windows in wild bursts. Elena woke to the sharp crash of something falling below. Her eyes flew open. The sound came from the basement. Beside her, Daniel didn't stir. He slept deeply, always had. Or pretended to. She waited, listening. A faint thud followed, then silence, heavy and complete. Her heart pounded as she slipped from the bed, feet meeting the cold floor. "Daniel," she whispered, shaking his shoulder. "There's someone downstairs." He groaned, irritated. "It's the wind, Elena. Go back to sleep." "I heard something fall." He turned toward her, eyes flat and tired. "It's a storm." "You're imagining things again." That last word, again, stung. She froze, retreating into silence. Daniel sighed, rolled over, and within minutes his breathing evened. But Elena stayed awake, staring into the dark, the noise replaying in her mind like a warning. By morning, the storm had passed. The air smelled of damp earth and cold steel. Daniel left early for work, muttering about a meeting. The house, once filled with Rain's voice, was now still. She moved through her routine, trying to shake the unease. When she gathered laundry from the hallway basket, something caught her eye. A small piece of cloth half hidden beneath. She pulled it free. It was white once, maybe a handkerchief. Now it was stiff, stained with dark, dried blood. Her throat tightened. When Daniel returned that evening, she showed it to him. "What is this?" she asked quietly. He examined it briefly, almost amused. "From an old therapy exercise. One of my patients had a trauma response during art therapy. You wouldn't understand." She wanted to believe him. But his eyes lingered on her a moment too long, his tone too calm. That night, Elena lay awake again, listening to the creaks of the house, and somewhere beneath, a faint tapping like fingers brushing against wood. The morning after the storm, the world looked deceptively calm. Sunlight glinting off puddles, children in rain boots splashing their way to school. Elena decided to walk downtown, convincing herself that a few hours away from the house would quiet her nerves. She found a small cafe on the corner of Maple and Fifth, the kind that smelled of cinnamon and old books. The barista smiled when she ordered a black coffee, no sugar. For once, she didn't think about Daniel's schedule or the stain she'd folded into the laundry pile. As she stirred her drink, she felt someone watching her. A woman, mid-30s, blonde, eyes wide with something like recognition, stood near the counter, frozen. Their eyes met. "Elena?" the woman said, hesitant. Then with a frown, "No, Rachel?" Elena blinked. "I'm sorry?" The woman's face drained of color. "Oh God, I must have made a mistake." She backed away, knocking her purse against a chair. A lipstick rolled across the floor, unnoticed. "I thought you were someone else." But her gaze lingered, a flicker of fear. Or guilt. Elena couldn't tell which before she hurried out into the street. Disappearing into the crowd, Elena sat motionless, the echo of that name pulsing in her mind. Rachel. By the time she got home, the light had faded to gray. Daniel's car was already in the driveway. He was in his study, back straight, pen scratching across a notepad. When she told him about the encounter, he looked up slowly. What did she look like? His voice was calm, but his eyes sharpened. "She said I looked like someone named Rachel." He set his pen down. "And you told her your name?" "Yes, why?" He stared at her, expression unreadable. People mistake identities all the time. Don't dwell on it, but his hand went steady. Disciplined Daniel was trembling slightly as he lifted his glass of water. That night, he stayed awake long after she pretended to sleep, pacing the hallway outside their room. Elena listened, her pulse sinking with each creak of the floorboards. When the pacing stopped, she heard the soft metallic click of a key turning, the one that locked the basement door. And then, silence. The name Rachel stayed with her like a splinter under the skin. Even in sleep, Elena could hear it whispered through her dreams, a stranger's voice calling from somewhere she couldn't reach. By morning, Daniel was already gone, leaving behind the faint scent of his cologne and the hollow quiet of the house. She wandered through their routine spaces, kitchen, hallway, the study door she wasn't supposed to open. Daniel's office had always been his sanctuary, filled with neatly labeled folders, shelves of psychology journals, and framed degrees. But that morning, something in her urged movement over obedience. Her fingers shook as she tried the handle. Unlocked. Inside, the order was oppressive. Files arranged alphabetically, books squared with the desk edge. She ran her hand along the rows until one detail stopped her. A locked drawer, small brass keyhole glinting beneath the desk. She hesitated. Then she remembered the spare keys hanging on the laundry hook. The third one fit. Inside lay a collection of manila folders, thick and worn. Each was labeled with a patient's name. Her breath caught when she saw it. Not once, but 5 times. Rachel. Different surnames. Different dates. Same first name. She opened one. Inside were notes written in Daniel's sharp handwriting. Patient displays attachment fixation. Responds positively to control methods. Another page read, "Therapy discontinued. No further contact recommended." A chill ran through her. She flipped through the last file and froze. Paperclip to the final report was a photo. A woman in her 30s with blonde hair, nervous smile, eyes wide. The woman from the cafe, Elena, she turned. Daniel stood in the doorway, face unreadable, hands clasped behind his back. "I was looking for what?" His voice was calm, too calm. "Evidence of something that doesn't exist?" He crossed the room slowly, taking the folder from her trembling hands. "You promised me after last time you'd stop this." "Last time?" "The paranoia," he said softly, as if speaking to a patient. "You're slipping again." Her throat closed. He placed the folder back, locked the drawer, and smiled. "Let me worry about my patients, Elena. You just need rest." That night, as she lay in bed, she swore she heard footsteps in the basement. Deliberate, dragging, and the sound of the lock turning once more. Sleep came in fragments after that night. Thin, fragile moments of rest cut by the echo of footsteps below. Elena told herself it was the furnace, the wind, old pipes expanding. But deep down, she knew the sound had rhythm, intent. Daniel had grown more guarded. His office door stayed locked. The basement key never left his pocket. A small brass shape she glimpsed whenever he changed his clothes. Once she asked what was down there. "Storage," he said flatly. "You wouldn't understand the organization of my work." He smiled when he said it, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the kind that made her body tighten with unspoken fear. That night, she lingered by the basement door after he'd gone to bed. The wood was cold under her palm. She leaned close and listened. Silence, then, faintly, a scratch. Not sharp, not loud, but steady, like fingernails dragging against wood. Her breath hitched. "Hello?" she whispered. The sound stopped. She stumbled back, pressing a hand to her chest. For a moment, she wondered if she'd imagined it. If Daniel was right, if the whispers and noises were just fragments of her own mind, fragile from years of suppression. By morning, she told herself it had been a dream. She made breakfast, ironed his shirts, nodded when he mentioned a late session at the clinic. Yet her eyes kept drifting to the bulge of the keychain at his hip. When he left, she crept down the stairs, stopping at the heavy door at the back of the basement. The handle was cold, the lock unyielding. She pressed her ear against it. From somewhere behind the door came the faint sound again. Not scratching this time, but breathing. She bolted upright, ran upstairs, and locked herself in the bedroom. All day she told herself she would forget it, that she had to forget it. But as night fell and Daniel's footsteps echoed across the floorboards above, she realized something terrifying. The breathing hadn't come from behind the door. It had come from the vent, just beside her ear. The knock came just after noon, sharp, deliberate, echoing through the hallway. Elena froze mid-step, heart thudding. Daniel looked up from the living room, where he'd been typing notes into his laptop, his expression instantly hardening. "I'll get it," she said quietly. When she opened the door, two figures stood in the rain light, a man and a woman, both in dark coats, their badges catching a dull gleam. The taller one spoke first. "Mrs. Grant? Detective Harlan? And this is Detective Reeves. May we come in?" Daniel was already behind her before she could answer, voice smooth and welcoming. "Of course, officers. Please, come in out of the cold." They stepped inside, shaking off the drizzle. The air in the room tightened. "We're following up on a missing persons report," Reeves said, flipping open a notepad. "Rachel Moore. You may have seen her on the news." Elena's stomach twisted at the name. She forced her face to stay neutral. Daniel's tone remained calm. "Yes, I heard about that. Terrible case. You knew her," Harlan said evenly. "She was one of your patients," Daniel nodded. "A few sessions years ago. Severe trauma history. Eventually transferred to another specialist." Reeves studied him. "When was the last time you saw her?" Daniel's fingers tapped once against his thigh before stilling. "I couldn't tell you exactly. Months ago, at least." Elena watched a bead of sweat slide down his temple. His voice was steady, but his body betrayed him. The slight tremor in his hand as he reached for his glass. The pulse visible just beneath his jaw. "Would you mind," Harlan asked, "if we took a brief look around?" "Routine, of course." Daniel smiled. "Practiced, polite. I'm afraid not without a warrant." "Surely you understand." The detectives exchanged a look. Reeves closed her notepad. "Of course, Dr. Grant. We'll be in touch." When the door finally closed, the silence was deafening. Daniel turned to Elena, eyes sharp now, all warmth gone. "You didn't tell them anything, did you?" She shook her head, unable to speak. He smiled faintly. "Good." But as he returned to his study, she saw his hand still shaking, just enough to make the doorknob rattle. That night, as rain began to fall again, Elena sat alone at the window, the detective's words echoing through her head. Rachel Moore. The name wouldn't let her sleep. The days after the detective's visit blurred together, time folding in on itself. Daniel's warmth, thin as paper, vanished completely. He began staying home more, claiming stress from false accusations, and Elena felt the house shrink around them, every room echoing with unspoken threat. Her phone disappeared first. One morning she couldn't find it on the nightstand. "You probably misplaced it," Daniel said lightly, sipping his coffee. "You've been forgetful lately." She searched drawers, cushions, even the laundry basket. It was gone. The next day the internet stopped working. The day after that, the house phone line went dead. "You said you wanted peace," he told her, smiling. "Now you have it." Elena began to lose track of days. Sometimes she'd wake on the couch with no memory of lying down. Once she found her own handwriting scrawled on a notepad. "Check the closet." "Don't trust him." She didn't remember writing it. "Daniel?" she asked one evening, voice trembling. "Did I ever have a breakdown?" He looked at her with clinical tenderness. "You don't remember?" Her throat tightened. "No." "It was years ago," he said softly, stepping closer. "After your miscarriage, you started seeing things, hearing them. I took care of you then, just like I'm taking care of you now. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, fingers lingering a moment too long. The touch felt like a cage. Later that night, she tried to confront him about the files, the noises, the missing phone. But he silenced her with words, not hands. "You're spiraling again," he whispered, leaning close. "I know the signs, something in her broke." Tears came soundlessly, and he kissed them away, his voice soothing, his control absolute. When he finally left her side, she lay in the dark, unsure what was real. The lines between his truths and her own blurred until she couldn't tell whose memories she was living. Somewhere below, the faint sound returned, scratching, soft and steady. But this time, Elena didn't move, because for the first time she wondered if the sound wasn't from the basement at all. Maybe it was inside her head, exactly where he wanted it to be. Daniel's tone that morning was calm, casual, almost affectionate. "I'll be gone till Sunday," he said, slipping on his watch. "Conference in Chicago. Try to rest, You've seemed fragile." He kissed her forehead before leaving, felt rehearsed, like the closing act of a performance he'd perfected over years. The front door shut with a soft click, and for the first time in weeks the house fell utterly silent. Elena waited an hour, maybe two, long enough for the sound of his car to fade completely. Then she moved. Her hands shook as she went to the kitchen, retrieving the spare key set from the top of the pantry. Daniel thought she didn't know it existed. She gripped the one marked B, brass worn smooth from use, and descended into the basement. The air was cold, damp, heavy with the smell of bleach and dust. The faint bulb flickered overhead, throwing long shadows across the concrete floor. She followed the sound she'd heard so many nights before, the quiet rhythmic breathing that wasn't her imagination. The closet stood in the far corner, plain wood, small enough to seem harmless. But as she reached it, her pulse began to race. The lock gleamed faintly, the same she'd stared at in fear for weeks. She slid the key in. It turned with a soft, final click. Inside, the air felt colder still. Boxes lined the shelves, identical, neatly stacked. Each labeled in Daniel's handwriting. Therapy Subject A, Therapy Subject B, and so on. Her hand trembled as she opened the first one. Inside were objects, a silver bracelet, a broken earring, a single strand of blonde hair taped to a page, another box, a red hair tie, a photograph of a woman smiling nervously at the camera. Elena's breathing quickened as she moved to the last box on the bottom shelf, heavier than the rest. She lifted the lid and froze. A blood-stained scarf lay folded on top. Beneath it, a driver's license, Rachel Moore. Her mind spun. The cafe, the woman's terrified eyes, Daniel's shaking hands when the detectives came. Every piece fit together like a puzzle she'd been too afraid to finish. She stumbled back, the box slipping from her grip. Photos scattered across the floor. Different women, different faces, each labeled. Catalogued, owned. A creak sounded above her. He froze. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she stared at the basement stairs. Daniel wasn't supposed to be home until Sunday. The key was still in the lock. The basement door creaked open, and the light from above cut through the darkness like a blade. Elena froze where she stood, the scattered photos around her boots, the box still open on the floor. "Sweetheart." Daniel's voice floated down, calm and measured. "What are you doing down there?" Her throat went dry. "I heard something. I thought maybe—" He descended one step at a time, his shoes echoing softly against the concrete. "You thought what?" he asked, his tone almost gentle. "That I was hiding something?" When he reached the bottom, the false warmth in his smile vanished. His eyes found the open box, the blood-stained scarf. The muscle in his jaw twitched. "You shouldn't have done that," he said quietly. Elena backed away. "What is all this, Daniel?" He sighed, and the sound almost weary. "You wouldn't understand. They came to me broken, fractured. I helped them." "Helped them?" Her voice cracked. "You killed them." He tilted his head, studying her like one of his patients. "No, Elena, I saved them. I showed them what obedience feels like. Real safety, not the chaos they lived in. But they never listen. Not fully. Not until it's too late." She felt her stomach twist, her heart hammering so loud it nearly drowned his words. But she forced herself to stay still. To nod, to listen. Daniel stepped closer. I thought you were different. You never asked questions. You let me protect you from yourself. Her hands were behind her back now, fingers fumbling. The phone, the spare one she'd found hidden in the kitchen drawer 2 days ago, was recording. Every word, Daniel, she whispered, forcing her voice to tremble. If you wanted to fix them, why hide them? He smiled faintly, the expression almost tender, because people don't understand what healing looks like when it's honest. They call it cruelty. But you, Elena, you see me, don't you? She met his eyes, tears stinging. I do, she whispered, for a moment's silence. Then he stepped forward and placed a hand on her cheek. Soft, affectionate, monstrous. Good, he murmured. Because now you'll help me start over. She nodded slowly, hiding the phone in her fist as it kept recording. Proof of the monster who still believed he was saving the world. Elena moved like a shadow through the darkened hallway, her pulse drumming in her ears. Daniel's voice still echoed from the basement. Smooth, steady, coaxing. She didn't wait for it to rise again. Her fingers tightened around the phone in her pocket, the recording still running. She climbed the stairs slowly, forcing each creak to sound like hesitation, not escape. When she reached the kitchen, she didn't breathe until the basement door shut behind her. The rain outside had turned to mist, soft against the window pane. The world beyond the house looked unreal, too calm, too normal. She slipped on her coat, grabbed her car keys, and stepped into the night. The drive was a blur of trembling hands and flashing headlights. Once she thought she saw Daniel's car behind her, that gray sedan she'd memorized after years of waiting for it each evening. But it was only her own reflection in the mirror. She reached the police station just before dawn. The officer at the front desk looked up, startled by her wild eyes and soaked clothes. Ma'am, are you all right? She placed the phone on the counter, voice breaking. You need to hear this. Within an hour, the station filled with murmurs, papers, and the hum of radios. Detectives Harlan and Reeves appeared, the same pair who'd come to her door days before. Reeves hit play. Daniel's voice filled the room. Calm, articulate, horrifyingly sure of himself. They came to me broken, I helped them. You can't heal what you don't control. The recording ended in silence. Harlan exhaled slowly. We'll get him, he said. By mid-morning, the house was swarming with police. Elena watched from the back seat of a patrol car as they carried boxes from the basement. Folders, jewelry, photographs. Each object she'd seen in that closet now tagged and catalogued. The officers moved like ghosts through the mist. She saw Daniel once being led out in cuffs. His expression wasn't rage, it was disappointment, almost pity. He caught her gaze and smiled, a small, knowing smile that froze her blood. Hours later, sitting in the sterile calm of the interview room, Elena gave her statement. Every word felt like dragging a knife through her own skin, cutting away the version of herself that had believed, obeyed, survived. When it was over, Reeves handed her a blanket. You're safe now, she said softly. Elena nodded, but the word safe felt hollow. That night, back in a temporary motel room, she stood before the mirror. Her reflection stared back, pale, hollow-eyed, but alive. She touched the side of her face where Daniel's hand had rested hours earlier, phantom warmth still clinging to her skin. He's gone, she whispered, but her voice trembled. The room was too quiet, the silence too familiar. Her eyes met her reflections again. Same posture, same faint tilt of the head, the same measured breath. And before she could stop herself, she said softly, almost tenderly, He's still in me.